What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the JERRY1 Podcast here on this rainy Wednesday afternoon. But the podcast still goes on. This is episode number 25 of the JERRY1 Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Felice. Still getting it done as the host. But what do we got in store on this podcast? Another action-packed episode on the JERRY1 Podcast. A lot going on. We got the tournament challenge final weekend coming up, final four, and the championship game on Monday coming up. Can confirm no JERRY1 fantasy owner will win it this year. It's going to be another person. Four people in the hunt for the championship. I'll talk about that. We got the fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey playoffs going on. It's not looking good for the 3-seed Larry. Not looking good for the 5-seed Matt in basketball. It's not looking good. Actually, I haven't even looked at that yet. Real quick, as we are here in the intro. And Matt takes the lead in hockey. So 164-157 here on this Wednesday afternoon. Matt takes the lead over Josh. So that's been an exciting playing game. First round of the playoffs in basketball. Not as exciting as the playing game in hockey. But coming this Monday, the semifinals will get going. But I'm going to start this podcast with the fantasy baseball draft that just happened this last Sunday. Yes, we're going to talk about that first. You're wondering, why are we talking about that? Because today's guest is part of the baseball league. I'm for the second time. Fletcher Reese, my good friend Fletch, is on the podcast today. He's going to talk about his fantasy baseball draft and his season going forward. And we'll touch on his bracket and fantasy football a little bit as well. But another clap in fantasy football. We got to talk about that with Fletch. But that's what we got in store. Episode 25, fantasy baseball, Fletch, tournament challenge, basketball, hockey, and then we'll get you out of here. But here is episode 25 of the JERRY1 Podcast. Here we go. Fletcher's going to come on in a second, but first let's talk about fantasy baseball. Before we talk about fantasy baseball, I just say I forgot to mention once again in the intro what today's date is. Today is Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Special JERRY1 birthday today, so we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But let's talk about fantasy baseball. Let's put the standings up there, the preseason standings, I guess you call it. But fantasy baseball's draft just happened on Sunday. Not the turnout that you hope for as a commissioner, but Johnny, falling asleep a little bit. Got a kid, can't blame him there, but he's a great owner. We got 18-week regular season. Once again this year, he's defending champ. He missed some of last year's draft. He'll turn it around. He'll be fine. Josh, we'll talk about Josh in a second, but a little concerned that he wasn't there, but he's in control of his team. Andrew, just, struggling with China. That's the reason why we had the draft so late. Communications with Andrew. Hopefully we can communicate with him here soon. Hopefully he figures out his team, starts setting that lineup, and everything will be good there. I'm not mad as a commissioner. Never am. But these three owners, I believe, will turn around, even despite missing the draft. They'll be good. But anyway, let's talk about the draft. Let's talk about the season. Let's talk about week one. Like I said, Johnny's defending champ. I think I said it, but if not, he's the defending champ. He beat Paul, the undefeated Paul, in the finals last year, so that was pretty impressive stuff. So Johnny, trying to go back to back. I mean, you can say what you want about asterisk season or whatnot. Sure, you can say Paul, that was his one successful season was that season, but Paul track record in fantasy sports is there. Johnny's track record in this league is there. He went to the finals in 2019 when I beat him, so he's done it over a long period of time. So it's not just a shortened season. Paul, you gotta look at him as always a threat. Me and Sam Shields have never missed playoffs in this league, so we're good teams. Kurt Ireland, Matt Felice's 2017-2018 inaugural fantasy hockey team is the only other now joined by Kurt last season in this league to miss the playoffs as the regular season scoring champ. So Kurt scored the most points in this regular season and missed the playoffs. Did win the consolation tournament to get his money back. So I'm a little added. There ain't going to be no consolation tournament this year, but there is going to be legit playoffs, 18-week regular season, 2 week per round in the playoffs. And then we did add big news. We added 6 playoff teams this year, so that's huge. It's a 26-week journey overall, 26-week calendar weeks. You got the 11-week, 2-week here, and then you got the 2-week All-Star break. 26 weeks until we find a winner last Sunday. So 25 weeks to this Sunday, we will crown a champion in this league. It's nice that we got this league in. Basketball and hockey, not so lucky. Didn't finish it last year, but this league we did. But it's a big year for Andrew and Fletch, who are coming into their second years. Really didn't feel like they had a first year in this league. And they're getting their first full season. Obviously, a huge year for Larry and Josh, never made the playoffs in this league. Huge year for Matt to prove that he belongs in this league. Jack as well. But of course, Kurt, Paul, Johnny, all got a lot to prove. Me and Sam just doing our thing, making the playoffs. A lot of us doing our thing. But it's a very exciting league. You got Blake. He was the 1 seed last year. He's playing Paul, who was 1 seed last year. Or Blake was the 1 seed 2 years ago. Paul was the 1 seed last year. They play each other in week one. I think another intriguing matchup is obviously me, Johnny. We met in the finals in 2019. We met in the semifinals in 2020. We split both of those. We both went on to win championships. Obviously, that was both of these years. And now here we are playing week one. All-time series tied 2-2. It's going to be a good one. Week one. Definitely look out for that one. Matt versus Kurt's an interesting one. You like Kurt in this one. Kurt's got Matt's boy, Kyle Lewis, who Matt's teammate on this Wednesday afternoon is still called Kyle the next big thing. Lewis, the next big thing. Kyle the next big thing, Lewis. Let me get that right. So that's an intriguing matchup. That could go either way. I like Kurt, but we'll see. Sam versus Josh. Josh has lost 17 of his last 18 in this league. So we'll see what he does. Not a very successful franchise at all. While Sam has been a successful franchise, you forget. You talk about my championship, you talk about Johnny's championship, but you forget Sam is the inaugural champion in this league. His only championship in JERRY1 Fantasy Sports. We'll see what he does in basketball this week, but he's looking like he's going to win a playoff game finally, postseason game. We'll see if Sam can get it done again in this league again this year. We'll see what happens. And of course, Larry Fletch, two teams that didn't even make the consolation tournament last year. Two teams that want to make their first playoff. So we'll talk to Fletch. I'm really intrigued to hear his thoughts on his team. And then Jack. Andrew, Jack is a former runner-up, lost to Sam in the finals that 2018 inaugural season. While Andrew, China guy, Wuhan Pets. We'll see what happens there. But that's week 1. I think it was a very exciting draft. We didn't see Mike Trout go number 1. Mookie Betts went number 1 with Paul. Paul got the first pick. Mike Trout had gone first overall in this league all 3 years. Now it's Mookie. Trout does go to 4 to Fletch. Fletch wanted Garrett Cole, missed his first overall pick last year, ended up getting Trout. Now he drops Trout this year. Fletch is with the Trout man. We'll talk about that. But just a whip around with the draft. I thought it was a pretty good draft. It didn't go too long. It definitely went a little long. It's expected when it's 20-plus rounds. At 23 rounds, 12 people. There was like 3 auto picks, so it went a little faster. But, it's a good draft. It was the 24th draft in JERRY1 Fantasy Sports history. Me and Matt have been a part of all 24. I got 2 championships, hoping for a third. Let's see it, and that's not the greatest percentage, but at least I do have a championship. A lot of people looking for their first championship. A lot of those guys, obviously. Josh looking for his first championship in this league. Larry looking for his first championship overall. Fletch overall. Paul in this league. Paul looking for the career grand slam. He has 3 in football, 1 in basketball, 1 in hockey. He's the baseball. Blake looking for his first overall. Matt looking for his first in this league. Kurt overall. Jack overall. Andrew this league. So we'll see what happens. Week 1 is under it. You're watching this on Thursday, April 1st. Yeah, that's not April Fool's. You're watching this on April 1st, 2021. You're watching this April 1st, 2021. So the games have already gotten going. I like to think I'm ahead. I don't know, but it's a little delayed since this is filmed on Wednesday. But, that's baseball. I'm excited. Whip around with the league. Week 1. If we have a podcast next week, we'll be talking about week 1 as well because it's 11 days long. So it's a little extended. But that's fantasy baseball. And April 1st, 2021. I got to get better with my dates on this pod. But it's come to that point of the show with our conversation with Fletch that I promised. And here is that conversation with Fletch. We're going to talk about his baseball team. We're going to talk about football, his bracket, all that. Here is that conversation with Fletcher Reese. Today's guest is on the podcast for his second time. Hard to believe, but he's in his 7th season now in JERRY1 Fantasy Sports overall. Still in pursuit of that first championship, but he's in his 2nd season in JERRY1 Fantasy Baseball. My good friend, Fletcher Reese. Fletch, how's it going?
It's going great, man. We're gearing up. We got opening day tomorrow. Yep. Everyone's excited. Everyone's a little bit nervous. We're working through the butterflies in the stomach, but it's all good.
Where are you coming from today?
Same place as I was last time, Nick. Here in my apartment in Jersey. Becoming a pretty regular resident here in Jersey. I think this is where I'm going to stay. I don't know if going back to Seneca Falls is in the plans anytime. So it's going to be, I'm a Jersey boy from now on.
That's all right, man. You're Seneca Falls at heart. But
that's right.
So what's the weather looking like for Yankees opening day?
It's looking good. It wasn't looking good yesterday. There was a little bit of a weather scare going on, but as of right now, it seems like we're going to have some room in there for an afternoon game. So if it works out okay, we can avoid the huge disaster of a rainout on opening day, and I definitely don't want to have to deal with that. So let's just cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Yeah. So your fantasy baseball team, it is technically your 2nd year, even though it still feels like it's your 1st year because of how short last season was. I don't even really remember that season too much. But you had the 4th overall pick. Now, if people remember, you had the 1st overall pick in last year's draft, which you were a little late to the draft that last year, and you ended up with Mike Trout. Rumors were out there that you were going to go for Garrett Cole, but This year, 4th overall pick, Trout, who's gone third, 1st overall. He's gone 3 straight years in this league, every year, 1st overall. He was there at 4, and you took him 4th overall. Yeah, Fletch, what went into the decision of the redemption with Mike Trout?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a redemption pick. Sitting in that 4 spot, I was really hoping that Garrett Cole would slip down. His ESPN rank was like number 4, I think. So if I could get him at that spot, it would be perfect. But you know what? He got grabbed at number 2, then DeGrom went right after him. And looking at the field, I thought, hey, like Mike Trout, he's going to be MVP form just like he always is. He's probably one of the most stable players in baseball and in all of sports, really, just with his consistency season after season. So instead of taking a chance on Tatis or Acuna, or maybe even trying a pitcher in the 1st round and grabbing Bieber, I thought, hey, why not go with Mike Trout? Because I know he can perform. So overall, I thought that was the right move to make. So I'm hoping that he continues his consistent ways this year.
Yeah, and in a points fantasy baseball league, Mike Trout's that number 1 guy. It's always like there's a very good chance he's not going to get you in the negatives for the day. Even if he strikes out, he'll still make up with a hit or a walk to get you in the positives throughout the day. So he's a great player nonetheless. But yeah, Cole and Bieber definitely top 2, but there's a lot of great pitchers in this league too, like DeGrom as well. This is so you went 2-5 last year. Didn't make the playoffs, didn't even make the Constellation tournament, but still, the last year was just learning the league, I guess we could say, for your team. But this is your first full season, 18-week regular season, 6 weeks of playoffs. What's the mindset of your team going into this year?
I'm a lot more confident than I was last year, that's for sure. I mean, realizing that it's 9:30 and I'm late for my fantasy draft is not a great way to start. And, I had a lot of good hitters on my team, but I didn't realize how much pitching was valued in this with this points league and how you guys have the rules set up. So this year, my team I feel like it's just a lot more balanced with the hit. It's got great hitters at the top of the lineup with Trout, Bregman, and I got Eddie Rosario back, who I had last year. But I also picked up really great pitchers to kind of, even out the rotation. Luis Castillo, Lance Lynn, Corbin Burns. Those guys are all grabbed in my first 5 rounds. So I think that from the huge impact that pitchers have on a day-to-day basis, I think I'm in a good spot.
Yeah, and you have 1 guy pitch on opening day. That's Luis Castillo. And he's playing at 4:00. So maybe by the time this airs, maybe he's got like a 1 hitter going. Who knows against the Cardinals? But you'll learn. I mean, from the first year. I mean, maybe you learned from last year, but this is a league you see in fantasy basketball where you got to pick up a lot of guys. But in fantasy baseball, picking up pitchers is like a daily routine, or every other day, or every other 3 days, however you want to play it. Picking up pitchers is a key thing to do in this league, and a lot of times it can hurt you. You can pick up a guy you think, oh, he's going to pitch a great game. He pitches 3 innings, hold 6 runs, and then loses the game. That's a lot of minus points, so it's a lot of risk in there too. But you talked a little bit about your pitching staff. Who's 1 guy on this team you like as a pitcher going forward this year?
Well, I mean, it's got to be Luis Castillo, right? He's probably a front runner for the Cy Young conversation in the National League. So I've got a lot of confidence with him. And I think there's also other guys on the squad that, could show up as well. If Lance Lynn pulls off another good season, I think he'd be great. Sonny Gray, we saw great things from last year and kind of fell off a little bit towards the end of the season. But I wouldn't say there's just like 1 clear guy that I'm going to put all my stock into. I'm going to take the field and kind of weigh everyone equally.
Yeah. One strategy I like to use in this league after a few years now in it is really because a closer is huge in this league. And I added at the start of this league, I added 2 release pitching spots, and ESPN that's not in their standard to have spots even for a relief pitcher. I added those just because closers can be a big deal with the 5 points for a save. And I always go heavy on closer. I think I got about 4 of them this year. And the thing with the MLB, closers are starting to become very rare. Not even a lot of teams even have a actual closer on their team, and you don't even know who's going to close from game to game. But,
Right.
I noticed you picked up. Let's see, you got relief. You got about 3 relievers on your team. Just help me out a little bit. When did you draft these guys?
Yeah, I took Will Smith, reliever from Atlanta, in the 13th round. Fast forward about 4 rounds after that, I took Joakim Soria from Arizona. And then right towards the end of the draft in round 19, I took Peter Fairbanks, who pitched well for Tampa Bay in the playoffs last year. So, you know, for relief pitchers, having a big that many points for a save is very important. It's something to definitely keep track of as I get through the year. I think relief pitching is probably a position I could add more to as we start to make pickups and actually see how these guys are performing. I think it's pretty much standard in any fantasy league that you should have the expectation that, hey, maybe like 5 to 6 players on your team you're going to have to drop because they're just not going to perform to the expectations that you have. Some of these flyers you took at the end of the draft are going to be basically worthless to you. So I think I set myself up good to start the year based on projections, but exactly that. They're just projections. I'm definitely going to look to add more relief pitching as we go through and see how the first week shakes out and how these teams are using their players.
Yeah. And, like I said, one guy who's not a closer right now could be a closer in a few weeks from now. So you just don't know. So let's talk a little bit about your week 1 matchup. You're playing my college friend Larry. Larry has not had a lot of success in this league in a couple of seasons. Never made the playoffs. You actually open up the season against 3 non-playoff teams. I know it's different teams every year with everybody, but you take past experience into the next year when dealing with, like, say you play like in football, for instance, like playing a Matt and Paul who's so good at football. Do you just do you ever take that in consideration with your schedule? I mean,
I'd say, minimally, definitely in football for sure. I think the consistency that we've seen from Andrew, Paul, Matt, year after year is definitely something that needs to be talked about and at least acknowledged, so that whenever you're playing those guys on the schedule, it's probably not going to be an easy matchup. For baseball, I mean, like, I wouldn't say as much, just because last year it was such a toss-up. We only had 7-8 weeks, right?
yeah,
It was like 7 weeks, right?
7 weeks,
So if you start the season like losing 2 out of your first 3 games, it's just going to be a rough year and it's really hard to recover. So I feel like last year was, like, for me, just dipping the toes in the water and seeing what fantasy baseball was and getting the full experience before putting in a full season like this. So I think if I'm going to make any judgments on someone's ability to play fantasy baseball or just fantasy sports in general, I want to do it over a full season rather than that half weird season we had last year.
Yeah, and it's definitely different from football and then baseball or basketball or any of the other ones that are daily fantasy, which is a totally different experience because, and you play fantasy basketball, but fantasy basketball could really affect on how many games someone plays a week. And now in fantasy baseball, I guess it's like starters. They usually pitch once a week, but there's a chance they could pitch twice a week, which could hurt or help your team. So there's always that in consideration as well. But 18-week regular season, we did expand to 6 playoff teams. Fletch, what is this record going to have to look like to get into the playoffs this year?
Well, it's got to be a winning record. It's got to be a winning record. I haven't seen a playoff team in any fantasy sport, that if they're not at least over 500 or 50%, then they're not in. So I just have to win at least 9. That's what I'm shooting for this year, Nick.
9. Yeah, that's not bad. I guess you could look at it. You could go head to head against Andrew, who came into the league. Still not sure where he is. Haven't been in communication. He missed the draft while he's in China. I know he's moved. I know he moved in China, so I'm a little nervous about his team. I haven't talked to him in a few days or a few weeks actually. And you both came into this league last year, so it's definitely. Does it feel like the first year for you still?
My first year doing this?
Yeah, in fantasy baseball.
Not really, right? Last year was my first year officially, but
Yeah.
it was half a season. So, like, I guess there's that first year rookie mentality a little bit. I'm kind of still coming in with a chip on my shoulder and an unproven talent that wants to play well and establish myself in this league, especially being part of the JERRY1 franchise, or what do you call it now? Conglomerate, the JERRY1.
I guess so.
Yeah, I want to establish myself in the JERRY1 umbrella as best as I can. Whether that's football, baseball, I just want to win a championship. So I'm here for it.
I wish the best for you. Hopefully it doesn't, this franchise, your baseball franchise, isn't as cursed as your football franchise as we transition over to football. Fletch, your fourth year is in the books. 2 straight years. I mean, we could talk about that 2018 that was pretty bad, but these last 2 years you were 5-2 both seasons after 7 weeks, 12-week regular season, and you don't finish over 500. Both seasons 6-6. Fletch, I just need a comment on these last 2, I guess, collapses, in the regular season to not make the playoffs.
Pretty pitiful, to be completely honest with you, Nick. It's awful. It's not fun seeing these teams collapse. And I appreciate you reminding me. I'm trying to push this out of my memory as best as I can from this year. But just really frustrating. I had a guy like Alvin Kamara this year who was an absolute monster. And then the 1 week, what he got COVID or something. And then Drew Brees got hurt. And then they had to fill in with Taysom Hill. And then as soon as Taysom Hill pops in, Mr. Selfish Hill himself runs in for every running attempt was him, not throwing to Kamara anymore on those little short routes that Drew likes to do. And it killed me. That was the point of the season where it was make or break for a win. And
it was a wild last week of the regular season for you.
Yeah.
You went from Jeremy threatening to not set his lineup other than Taysom Hill, which would have given you a gimme win to the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, Jeremy sets his lineups. He comes back to reality a little bit, he's nice and sets his lineup, and his team goes off and knocks you out of the playoffs. I mean, it's disappointing, but Jaron, on the other hand, it was his 7th year in the league. Got the championship, his first championship. What can you say about Jaron finally getting it done?
Hey, shout out to Jaron. Big props to Jaron with that. I know he's been working really hard for a long time, and he's always stirring up a conversation in the group chat somewhere. So I'm glad that he put his money where his mouth is this year and got the dub. So good for him.
And just keep in mind, I know it's been a little bit of a struggle for you lately, but keep in mind you've had a more recent playoff berth in this league than Justin Hilwa, who hasn't made it since 2016 now. It was me, but I finally broke that curse last year. So we'll see if because right now it's just you, me, and Justin are the last 3 owners in that league to not win a championship. And so it's a race for the last right now, I guess, for the playoffs. But fantasy football is so long away. Fantasy baseball is here, opening day. But let's talk a little bit about more Fletch disappointment. But it's a whole disappointment in JERRY1 with the JERRY1 bracket challenge, ESPN tournament challenge. We'll talk a little bit about this bracket, Fletch. Tied for 50th place right now. 530 points. You took Illinois. You did have Gonzaga in the championship, so there's that. I guess I talked to Paul about this last week. I mean, he picked Illinois too. I mean, What went into the decision to taking Illinois?
Not a lot, to be honest with you. I think this year I paid attention to college basketball as little as I have since before I came to Seton Hall. Seton Hall was really the only reason why I started paying attention to college basketball in the first place. Obviously, being a D1 school helps a lot to be invested in the team to actually watch the sport. So now that I'm past that point in my life and focused on other things, college basketball is just not something that's on the forefront of my mind all the time. I pretty much watched one tournament game. What is it, Illinois in the Big Ten, I think?
Yep.
Yeah, so I watched one Big Ten tournament game, and that was the one where Illinois won. And I thought, wow, a lot of big, tall, strong guys on this team, they could win it. And so I picked them to win. And unfortunately, the Big Ten is a big joke, I guess, because nobody lasted from that conference.
All right, I didn't watch a lot of college basketball this year, and I love college basketball, but I just didn't get into it this year.
Mm-hmm.
My Notre Dame team wasn't very good. I don't know. I just really didn't get into it this year, and well, my bracket's worse than yours, so. But I just want one of these times. I know you're loyal. You Venmo me your entry fees. One of these days, I'm gonna Venmo you back a winnings here. Well, I don't know what it's gonna be. Baseball, tournament challenge, football. I'm gonna do it one of these days. You're gonna go to the top. I believe it.
Yeah, I'll finally break even on all these investments I've given to you over the years.
I think I have a list of that. I know Justin Hill is like minus whatever, $600 or something like that. But you're up there. You're up there. But we're gonna work with on that. But Fletch, anybody who comes on my podcast for a second time, plays my new game called JERRY1 True or False. It is 5 statements about your JERRY1 franchise. I will be nice on you. I know you played fantasy basketball a long time ago. Where there's no questions on fantasy basketball. It's just baseball and football. And so 5 statements from easier to harder. You will start with 100 points. I will first say the statement, and then you will wager on the confidence on your answer, and then you'll say true or false. And so if you keep wagering it all, you can get up to 3,200 points. The top score right now is 1,200 points. And then crack the top 5 is 0. So all you got to do is play, and you'll crack the top 5.
Nice.
And if you get to 0, the next statement will be worth only 1 point. So wager wisely. Fletch, are you ready to play?
Okay. I'm ready, man.
All right, here we go. First statement. Don't overthink these first couple. 7-week regular season baseball last year. Fletch has 5 career wins in fantasy baseball. True or false?
I'm going to wager all of it and say false.
And that is correct. Yes. Fletch only won twice last season, but I'm expecting a bigger year out of Fletch this year. We'll see. All right. So 100 points. You're up to 200 points. So you can wager to 200 or you can wager less than 200. Here we go. Second statement. Fletch has been to a fantasy football finals. True or false?
Oof. I'm going to wager all of it and say false. I have not.
And that is correct again. Yes, Fletch has not been. I know these are not making your teams look good, these first couple of statements, but you are perfect on this game. All right, 400 points. All right, here we go. Third statement. Fletch's worst record in fantasy football is 2-10 in the regular season. True or false?
I'm gonna wager nothing and say false.
All right, that is the first time anyone's ever wagered nothing, but all right, you're lucky you're right because the answer is true because it is wrong. You were 2-10 in the 2018 fantasy football season. That is not a team to remember, but yeah, so you didn't wager anything. So you stay at 400. Moving on to the fourth statement. Andrew and Fletch, you both came into this league, baseball league in 2020 last year. Fletch has beaten Andrew in fantasy football. Or nope, hold on. over. Fletch is beating Andrew in fantasy baseball. True or false?
Again, I'm gonna wager nothing.
Is there nothing?
And say yes, I have. True.
Oh man, it is true. It is true. Yes.
Nice.
Fletch, you beat Andrew in week 3 last season. One of your 2 wins. You scored 334 points that week, which is your franchise high. You know that.
Very nice. Love that. Love that. And you know what? No matter what the answer is, I'm staying in the game. I'm above 0 points right now. So I'm in the top 5.
Yep, 400. All right. You can't correct the top score, but you're in the top 5. So 400 points. Here we go. Last statement. Fletch's longest winning streak in football is 5 games. True or false?
Once again, I will wager nothing and say false.
And you're lucky again because it's true.
There we go. That's why we don't wager anything. That's why I don't gamble.
It is true. From week 3 to week 7 of your first year in 2017, you won 5 straight games.
Wow. Surprised it is that good.
Yeah, you were a really good team. And then I think after that, you might have traded, what was it, Melvin Gordon or Stephon Diggs?
Oh, it was. Yeah, I traded Melvin Gordon for Stephon, but that was a horrible, horrible mistake.
I know people think you're mediocre in fantasy football so far, but people got to remember you were a playoff team that first year, and you were a legit team that year. Could have got the championship, but Fletch, you end this game with 400 points. Congratulations. You made the top 5. You actually, I believe, you've knocked out the people who are at 0. So people who get 0 now cannot crack the top 5 anymore. So how about that?
Love it. Let's go.
Fletch,
put my name somewhere on this league.
Yeah. Fletch, just wanted to give a shout out to your podcast, NBA Boys Podcast. It is Fletch's fantasy basketball podcast. I got to admit, Fletch, I almost shed a tear when you told me I was your role model into starting that podcast with your buddies in your fantasy basketball league. But it is on, let me confirm this, it is on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Is it on anything else?
Other than whatever the platform is that I upload the podcast to, Anchor. No, nowhere else.
All right. Yeah, cool. So everything going well with that podcast? That's pretty cool that you started that.
Yeah, man. I took a page out of the Nick Fleece playbook there, and going into the fantasy season this year, we had someone drop out the day of the draft, and it was a huge scramble to try to find someone to fill that spot. And if it was me being asked to join a fantasy league the day they were doing a draft, I would be my mind would be in shambles because I'd be just wildly unprepared and prepared to just lose my money. So I wanted to make sure that the league had some interest, that we raised the competitive level, and that we kind of started something that would keep people coming back year after year. I mean, we would no longer have those teams that would just draft and set their lineup once and then just never pay attention the entire season, because that doesn't help either, right? So the podcast was actually a perfect way to gain some interest, reconnect with some of my buddies from college, and just overall raise the competitive level of the league. So Nick, I attributed a lot to you because that's what you've done with JERRY1, and I can see that through our fantasy football league every single year, no matter what it costs. Even if I lose every single time, I don't care because it's fun. I want to be part of the conversation and it's competitive. And so that's what I did with my fantasy basketball league. So if you're listening and you're interested, check it out. NBA Boys Podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Pretty interesting. Probably each episode about an hour, and you get to hear me talk a lot, which is good.
Yeah, and I will say you're doing a great job as a host. I will say that. I think you're.
I take great pride. I've taken some lessons from you, Nick. I've watched some film, watched some of your podcasts in preparation, and some of the questions you ask. So I appreciate that.
I never really thought about it, but that is probably the reason why I started this, was to, mostly get people engaged, but it also, helps me catch up with people. It's not only just the conversation in the podcast itself, but also get to talk to you guys, outside the outside the Zoom recording, but it's a good time to keep everyone interested in the league, and I'm glad we're doing a great job. But Fletch, before I get you out of here, I'll probably get you on since it's fantasy baseball. I haven't had a fantasy season this long since I started the podcast. So I'll probably get you on later in the regular season. But what are your thoughts on one last initial thoughts on this team as it starts today when we're airing this on Thursday, but opening day?
Well, I would say, you know what? I've got a couple of guys on my squad that I'm really looking to make a huge leap. Gary Sanchez, he's got to play better. Last season was the worst season from him I have ever seen, and he's got to play better. And same thing with Clint Frazier. I mean, he had a good year last year, but I think there's such a high ceiling for him with great room to improve, especially if he can get that starting spot in left field. So my Yankee guys, really looking forward to make a big move and then hopefully push me to that championship at the end of the day.
Yeah, this league's interesting because it's like, I think there's like 7 Yankee fans in this league, and almost the whole team usually gets drafted every year. So it's always nice to see. But NBA Boys Podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. Check out Fletch's Fantasy Basketball Podcast. But Fletch, I wish you the best of luck with your fantasy baseball team this year, and I appreciate you coming on.
Of course, Nick. Thank you for having me, and keep doing a great job.
Thanks, you too. It was good to have Fletch on, good to catch up with him, and I wish the best of luck for his fantasy baseball team going forward. We'll hopefully get him on the podcast later this year, but we got a lot to talk about in this podcast too, so we got to get to it. Tournament challenge. Put it up there. You see the standings. JERRY1 just couldn't get it done, but someone will make their name in JERRY1 in a different way. And this ESPN tournament challenge, the second ever, coming to a close after this weekend on Monday. Because it won't be official until Monday. Top 3, like I said, get money this year. 11 brackets, 11 people still in the hunt for at least a share of that 710 pot. Here's how the scenarios work out. Out of those 11, only 4 can get the big prize of 479 or 497. 497. Second place is 142, and third place is 71. There will not be any ties. The way everything works out, there will not be any ties. It will work out that way. So it will be a 1, 2, 3. We will only have 3 winners. So that's pretty nice. It works out that way. But the only people that can win, Austin, Pat's friend Austin, Felton and Nelly. Hopefully I'm saying that right. But he's in first place right now as we speak. He's got a chance to win it. In fourth place, a tie for fourth right now. Dave Perrow's got a shot to win it. Waterloo represent. Bayheim's Booger, we talked about him before in this podcast. Jack Bergmaster, he's got a shot to win. And then, of course, Annie Weinberg, Kyle Murphy's girlfriend, has a shot to win. Those are the 4 that got to win. Here's how they win. Austin is the Gonzaga Baylor guy. It's Gonzaga Austin is Gonzaga Houston. Gonzaga Houston. Austin is the Gonzaga Houston guy. So if he gets Gonzaga over Houston, Austin will win. Dave Perro is the Gonzaga over Baylor guy. If Gonzaga goes over Baylor, Dave Perro will win. Then, of course, Jack Boogmaster, Baylor wins, he's in. And then Annie Weinberg, if Houston wins, she's in. If UCLA wins over Houston, if UCLA wins over Houston, that means Austin would win. If UCLA wins over Baylor, then Dave Perro would win. So that's how it all works out that way. I'm just going to really confirm that. That's, it's exciting. It sucks. Larry, who's tied for second right now, not really got a shot to win it. Definitely sucks for him. Yes. So if UCLA wins over Baylor, Dave Perro wins. UCLA wins over Houston, Austin wins. So that's how it works if UCLA wins. But let's be real. Gonzaga's going to win. I'm going to pick the winner right. I'm not going to be in the right for the money, but I'm going to pick it right. But, yeah, it definitely sucks for Larry. He's right there, but not really a shot because he didn't have Baylor or Houston there. And he had Illinois. He had Baylor in the Final Four, but not in the championship game. Fireball had Houston in the championship game, but so did Austin. And he's 10 points behind Austin, so he cannot catch him. So Fireball cannot move up. The Michigan loss hurt Fireball and helped Austin. It also hurt Larry and hurt Blake. And and Jeremy's chances too. So yeah, so that sucks for Larry. But Larry, it's definitely not good news for Larry this week because his basketball team's in a dip, might be left out of the semifinal, third place party, final party. Those 4 weeks there where those 4 teams go on. And now his bracket is not going to make the top 3 in scoring. So tough news for Larry because it was so big for him last podcast. Now it's disappointing. So we'll see who gets it. I like Dave Perrell's chances because I think it's going to be Gonzaga Baylor. I like Dave Perrell winning this thing. But we'll see. David Ferris right there. Can't sleep on him. He can still get third place. So he was up for the money last year. Or 2 years ago. I keep thinking last year. But that's it for that. We'll move on. We got to move on. Got a lot going on. Fantasy. We're going to move on right now. Fantasy basketball playoffs, first round, week 2 of 2. Kind of boring. I'm not gonna lie. As a guy who's just watching, it's kind of boring. Sam and Paul are just running away with it. Paul is absolutely running away with this team. But it's not even that situation where Larry could say, "Oh, if I'm in the other semifinal, I'll win this." Nope. Paul and Sam are dominating both semis. Sucked for Matt, had a great year. It sucks that Vukovic, the trade, and all that went through at the same time, and LeBron going down. Tough times for Matt as he was still looking for that first championship. Not saying it's over, but not looking good for Larry and Matt as their weekends come to a close or coming up here soon. Their weekend of the final weekend of the first round is coming to close here soon. So it's coming up this weekend. So we'll see what happens. I think it's interesting. I think you start to plan, a little bit. Plan if you're Kyle or Blake. Kyle is preparing for Paul, and Blake is preparing for Sam. And I think you just got to keep in your head, if you're Kyle, you're just like, I don't know if Paul can continue to do this, but he has. Paul has been the hottest team in this league. I know Blake has won 8 in a row. And it's hard to say anyone's been better than Blake lately. But this Paul team's been right there. It'd be a great final, Paul versus Blake. We talk about how Paul versus Blake in fantasy baseball on week 1, but not a lot of history there. But it could be history here. It could be a finals. Anytime you're in finals, that's history. But now Sam has become kind of this underdog role where Sam is, he's been the back-to-back number 1 seed. Now he's looking like he's finally going to get his first playoff win in a long time, playoff win in this league. And now Sam's all of a sudden in the conversation. You start thinking, what about Sam? There is Paul, there is Blake, there is Kyle, there's Sam. And at the beginning of the year, it was Kyle and Sam and nobody else. It still could be very easily Kyle and Sam in this final. So that's it for fantasy basketball. Now time to move on to fantasy hockey, which is pretty exciting. There's only one game going on. It's a playing game. Matt takes the lead. Josh had the lead going into week 2, but Matt takes the lead. This is interesting. Both looking for their first playoff win in fantasy hockey. Matt's first ever playoff game in fantasy hockey right now. And Josh, I'll spoil the birthday surprise at the end. It is Josh's birthday on this Wednesday. It would be very disappointing if he doesn't get out a playoff win on his birthday week. But we'll see what happens. Josh, he's choked in the playoffs before in fantasy hockey. We don't see him much in the playoffs at all. We saw him one time in fantasy football playoffs, 2017, won it all, first every year in JERRY1. 2018-19 fantasy basketball playoffs, Paul Thup says the 6 seed over Dustin Hill was a 3. And then here in fantasy hockey, it could be 3 straight 1-and-dones for Josh. Not 3 straight, but 3 times he's been in the fantasy hockey playoffs and 1-and-done. So a lot of time to go. It's only a 7-point game, 164, 157 at 3:08 on the East Coast here on this Wednesday afternoon. So a lot of time. It's going to be exciting to see who has the lead going into the weekend. It's just good to see some exciting matchup this week because JERRY1 brackets, not looking good. The fantasy basketball first round's kind of a dull. And but fantasy hockey is pretty exciting right now. And the winner gets Justin Kiefer. Justin Kiefer's ready. Paul and Nate are definitely ready. It's going to be exciting stuff going forward. But that's it. That's it. I'm tired. That's it for fantasy baseball, tournament challenge, basketball, and hockey. Hard to believe no football on the show, but we did talk a little bit about football with Fletch, so that was cool. But I already spoiled it on the hockey talk. This week, JERRY1 birthday. Technically a belated birthday. Josh Langley. Birthday is Wednesday, March 31st, 21, while we're recording this. Happy birthday, Josh. Happy belated birthday, Josh, if you're watching this right now or listen to this. Yeah, don't forget you can listen to this podcast on iTunes / Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, or Breaker. I don't know what Radio Public or Breaker is, but you can listen to it on there. Happy belated birthday, Josh. Best of luck in the fantasy. Best of luck to everyone, whether it's Matt in fantasy hockey, Matt in fantasy basketball, Sam in fantasy basketball, Paul in fantasy basketball, or Larry in fantasy basketball, or anybody in week 1 of fantasy baseball. I want to wish everyone the best of luck. Enjoy opening day. It's a good day. It's one of my favorites of the sports year. And, a lot going on, JERRY1, but it's going to cool down here in May when it's just baseball and baseball becomes the center spotlight of JERRY1 and it becomes more of a, a fantasy baseball JERRY1. That's all it becomes. But that's it. I want to thank Fletch for coming on today's podcast, episode 25. We're essentially, that's right. I didn't even say that in the intro. We are a quarter of the way to a century episodes. So we are a quarter away to 100. That's pretty cool. 25 episodes now in the books. So I want to thank Fletch for coming on. And I wish everyone the best of luck going forward. And I've been Nick Felice. Set your lineup. And we'll see you on the next JERRY1 Fantasy Sports Podcast. Goodbye.